Okay, welcome to our YouTube audience. We have Todd Keaton. Todd is just about to share some wisdom that he has for the class. Let's go, Todd. Tell us what you're thinking.
I know. Usually, what I call on my channel is infinite wisdom, which means buckus.
Okay, all right, I'm ready.
But anyway, like I was saying, and it brings me back to the homilies, what we're talking about here, when Peter was talking to Clement, and I don't know, this just sticks in my head every time we talk about this. If he lives in a tent, who is without bounds? If he's fond of fat, sacrifices, offerings, and drink offerings, who then is without need? And who is holy and pure and perfect? If he's pleased with lamps and wicks, who then placed the luminaries in the skies? I can't help but think of that.
Yeah.
When it comes to the menorah, all that stuff, if it was supposedly commanded, then why, again, like you and me talked about, where's the temple, where's the priesthood, where's the sacrifice?
Yeah.
Because that's not forever until the earth is over with, as Yeshua said.
Right.
And speaking of that, something else popped in my head this morning too.
All right.
As far as the supposed commandments of building everything and getting everything organized, this is how you do it, and all this, that, and the other, it brings back to mind that there is no record of Yeshua practicing anything in the temple that was oriented.
That was
There's
what?
No record of him doing it.
No record of him doing what?
Doing anything that the temple commanded. I mean, you go to the temple and you do this, and the priest had to do this, and the priest had to do this. There's no record of him ever doing that.
Yeah.
He goes to the temple to preach on the steps, or if he goes inside to kind of rack some heads a little bit.
Yeah.
Other than that, he doesn't do anything. It's, in fact, he cited his body was the temple. Rather, I'll tear down his temple, I'll rebuild it in 3 days. He's talking about the body. The body is the temple.
So we have in addition to the pseudo-Clementine literature, we have other things, and not just Christian ideas. In fact, I would challenge that some of these ideas aren't per se Christian,
right.
But they go back to more Jewish ideas. And that is that there's a way to think about God dwelling in the midst of his people that is apart from a physical tent or, in other words, there are those texts which seem to suggest that ultimately God can be in the midst of his people, but not in the way that, represents this physicality thing. And I think some of the writers pick up on it. In fact, anyone who reads the speech of Stephen is it Acts 7? You get this idea where there's a challenge to that physical temple and that physical tabernacle and tent and temple and so forth. So, interesting.
Or there's also evidence that Stephen was James. But anyway.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's some debatable things. Now,
it's just interesting to hear how the priests, there's no difference, how the priests answered Yeshua when he says, tear down this temple. And they said, it has taken us 46 years to build this temple. Us.
Mm-hmm.
Me. And that sticks out too.
Yeah.
That's very personal. It's the same thing
like people, they're taking ownership of it.
Yeah, just like people do with the church. It's our church.
Yeah.
Right. It is your church.
Yeah.
Not his.
Mm-hmm.
Just how my mind thinks, man. I just get on one tangent and I'm done. I lose her halfway through it.
No, no, I follow. And I think that there is a tension in the text. One is a very pro-temple, pro-cult, pro-sacrificial. There is that view, and that is the dominant view in the text. I mean, anyone who reads it is going to come away with, of course, that's the case. We have records not only in the Hebrew Bible, but in the Christian writings as well, where you get this very pro-temple, pro-cult viewpoint. And I think that a lot of that is because the victors write the history, as we say. But there's also an underlying a theme that seems to emerge from time to time that says that this is not the ideal. That's the way I've usually presented it. And, I have some friends of mine, many of you might be familiar with Cameron Waters and Aaron Abke, and these guys are, Cameron did Christspiracy and Seaspiracy and some of these films, and he and Aaron debated some very fundamentalist people, including Wes Huff, who's become very popular in the world today for apologetics and so forth. There's this big debate, and they're basically debating these two different worldviews of the biblical text. And in some ways, those who accept the whole book, nothing but the book, and say it's true, and they can win a debate if they're trying to debate someone who wants to say, well, yeah, maybe, blah, and they're real nice. What's the only way to win against an apologetic person, an apologist, somebody who believes, well, the sacrificial cult is from God, is to say, no, it's not. No, it's not. It is part of this lying pen of the scribes, and you almost have to be that blunt. And I know it's painful for some people, but to kind of tiptoe around it and say, well, I mean, look, I love the whole Bible, the wheat and the tares, but you've got to face the fact that that history has obliged. There is no functioning priesthood, and if another temple is built, I will go on record to say that it too will be destroyed, because the people will commit the same sins and crimes that they've done in all the other occurrences of trying to try this,
Well, what's the old classic phrase, the third time's a charm?
Yeah, I don't think so. Not in this case.
The first two temples didn't make it.
Yep.
Yeah. If they were supposed to have temples, why didn't they make it?
That's
Actually,
right.
technically the first three, because there was a temple made of in a tent. So technically,
Yeah. Good
course,
stuff.
The interesting thing is, I'm trying to think what the name of it is, the Islamic temple in Jerusalem.
You talking about the mosque?
Yeah, the mosque.
Yeah.
Look how long that has stood compared to the other temples.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say they're right. I'm just saying look
No,
how long.
I got you. Yeah, and I think you know this, but some people might not. There is the Mosque of Omar is different than this big blue what's called the Haram, that's in the middle. But either way, yeah, it stood, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I know that a lot of people are looking for it to be struck by lightning or otherwise removed so that a new temple can be built. And look, they have red heifers currently at biblical Shiloh, and people are just hoping that they remain pure. I mean, they started with 5, 2 have already been disqualified, but they have 3 more. And people think this is really a lot of tradition and a lot less Bible. Based on Numbers 19, people have built off of Numbers 19 and said, well, in order to rebuild the temple, we've got to kill a red heifer, mix the ashes with Mayim Chaim, living water, and the ashes of the previous red heifer, and then we're going to purify the Temple Mount and rebuild the temple. Well, there's a whole lot of complexity in that. And anyway, interesting stuff.
If you think about it too, all right, so you got 5 heifers and you're trying to find the perfect one, 2 of them disqualified. Isn't that kind of short of gambling?
That you're gambling that one
just
will
gambling, period.
Yeah.
You're just throwing dice. You're gambling, period.
Yeah.
I just think that's kind of fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I think I've seen this for about 30 years now, where people get all excited and they've got a new cow, and they're excited because this one's going to be it. And ultimately, Bessie grows a white hair and is disqualified. It happens every time. I've seen it over and over. So that's what's going to happen this time too.
Well, if they're holding on to them that long, of course you'll grow a white hair. It's getting old.
That's right. That's right. You got to hold on, though.
That's
all right, brother.
I got, buddy.
All right,
That's
well,
all
hang tight. Hang tight. You may have some more. James Erickson. Hold
Ross,
on.
how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully. How are you, sir?
Well, I'm just getting over the flu.
Oh, man, I hate that.
This is so strange. 31 years, I worked in law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
and I dealt in the public sector. I never got the flu.
Yeah.
Never. It was amazing. I retire, and what do you know? I get the flu.
Yeah. You get
But anyways,
alone by yourself.
yeah,
You must have gave it to yourself, I guess, huh?
you can go out into the crowds, and it's airborne out there. You get the flu.
Yeah.
And so I go to the Veterans Administration down here in Tucson, Arizona. They're really great. They got me all fixed up. It was good.
Well, I'm glad you're on the heel, on the mend, as we say.
Yeah, I'm just about over with it. But anyways, I just like you to clarify something with me. I'm not challenging you.
Oh,
I
that's
just want
fine.
you to-
It's fine if you are, by the way. Believe me, I get challenged all the time, and if I ever get to where I'm not challenging, or as people can't challenge me, then I need a new job. So feel free, challenge away.
Okay, so you were talking about the priest, the Levitical priesthood,
Uh-huh.
and they are the true anointed Mashiach.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
According to the Pentateuch and the priestly writer, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now, this is where I'm going to throw the wrench in the
Okay.
fire here, or in the toolbox.
All right.
So,
All right.
anyways, let's talk about Samuel. Okay.
Mhm.
According to what I know about Samuel, he was kind of a self-appointed prophet by God, and then he was a judge. Also, he did priestly duties by
Mhm.
sacrifices.
Yep.
So, but he wasn't anointed like the Levitical priesthood.
Mhm.
Do you know anything about his
Oh, yeah.
role?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just waiting. You tell me when to go. I mean, I'm listening, or I
Okay,
can.
all right. So then we go on, and he has the authority to anoint with oil King David.
Mm-hmm.
So, not being a priest to anoint somebody else, how does that work with being anointed? Him being a priest, a judge, and a prophet to anoint the king.
Yeah. You ready?
How's that?
That's
Yep,
good.
go ahead.
No, that's good. No, you bring up an excellent point. And part of the problem is people have lost an understanding of what is the Messiah. What was the Messiah? What is the Messiah supposed to be? And this is confused by Jews and Christians and people, because there's so much tradition and ideas out there that just aren't biblical. So, for instance, Samuel is not an anointed one. He's not a Messiah. He is an anointer. There's a big difference, okay? So I hear people a lot of times compare, they say Moses is a Messiah. No, he isn't. A Messiah is one who has been anointed, right? He is one upon whom the oil is placed. Aaron is biblical. I'm talking biblically now. Biblically, Aaron and his sons are called messiahs because they have oil put on them. In fact, Moses is the anointer. We're told in Exodus 28 and 29 and other places that Moses is told, go anoint Aaron and his sons. So Moses is an anointer. Aaron and his sons are anointeds, plural. They're anointed ones. They're messiahs. Samuel, now, by the way, the biblical writers hate this because here you've got Samuel. Samuel isn't even from the right lineage. He's not a Levite, and so the chronicler has to scramble to come up with a suitable response. And then we have some monkeying going on with the text of the family, so that Samuel's genealogy is changed in Chronicles. We'll get into all this stuff later when we get into the priesthood. But the idea that the point that I'm making is Samuel is outside of the traditional priestly cult, and he's basically called to reform the cult, and that's what he does. And he's a reformer, and so as a result of that, he's an anointer and not an anointed. Does that make sense? And we have other cases of that, by the way. Elijah.
I like that.
Elijah, by the way, is not an anointed one, but he is an anointer. He anoints Hazael. He anoints Elisha. There are various stories where we get these people who are filled with the Spirit by God, and they are called to anoint other people. So a lot of people make a whole lot about the Messiah. Messiah, the Messiah, the Messiah. What does the Bible say about the Messiah? And the anointed one, what I like to think about is, who are the anointers? That's the big point there, right?
Okay.
All right.
I got that part.
Okay.
Let's get on to David. Get on to David now.
Okay.
Because he was anointed.
Okay.
Anointed with oil.
He was by Samuel. Yeah.
Yep. So what would you call David?
David is a Messiah. David and David's sons are called Messiahs. In fact, there is a text that may be Psalm 89. I'm not sure if that's it or not. I had to look, but certainly is an anointed, where it says David and his sons are the anointed. So yeah, you're right. I mean, David and his sons are the Messiahs. That makes sense?
Yeah. Oh no, this is great.
Okay.
I thank you. And I'm going to stop because other people have questions. But thank you so much, Ross.
All right, man. I'm looking something up real quick. I wanted to.
Okay.
I'll come back to this. In fact, I'll flip to it in just a moment. But yeah, David and his sons are referred to as the Messiah, if you will. David and his sons.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like the way you emphasize that.
That's right. Good stuff. All right. Hey, James, I'm glad you're feeling better, and keep us posted, and we'll keep you in our prayers, brother.
Oh, one other quick question.
Okay.
When's Deuteronomy coming out? Your book.
Well, I've got a bunch of books that I'm working on, but Leviticus, the Torah tablet, is coming out next, and that's what's coming out. But we've got other things coming. Numbers and Deuteronomy will be behind that, and of course there are other projects as well. But the next thing to hit press is Leviticus for our new study. So,
will that be soon?
Very soon, yeah, within the next week.
Yeah,
or so.
I like these little books. They're great.
Yeah, they're good for taking notes anyway. All right, brother.
And reading. Thank you.
All right, man. Brother Doug Martin, how are you, my friend?
Doing well, Ross. How are you?
I am doing wonderfully. What kind of good wisdom came to your mind this morning?
Well, it's a perspective that I've come to that I thought I'd share. Maybe other people will resonate a little bit with it, because the genesis of the whole thing was maybe a year ago or so. In listening to you teach, the penny finally dropped for me.
Right.
And immediately after that, things were a little disconcerting.
Mm-hmm.
You're on shaky ground now compared to where you were before that penny dropping.
Yeah.
And one of the questions that came to my mind was, why does the Levitical Torah, why has it been preserved the way it has?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking everybody in the world practically has got a copy of that sitting on their shelf.
Yeah.
right? There's got to be a reason for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? If it were completely fraudulent, as many of us believe,
Mm-hmm.
what do we think? That these guys put something by God? They snuck one by him
Yeah.
and ended up with 80% of the Levitical Torah? I don't think so. I think he wants it in there.
All right.
I
I'm
think he
open.
wants
I'm
people to
liking
study
this.
it.
Yep.
Huh?
I'm liking this. Keep going.
All right. So why would he ensure for 25 centuries that this material was preserved? I think it's to demonstrate to anybody who wants to study it and learn that it's completely um, useless. It's completely fatuous. It
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't achieve relationship with Yahweh,
Okay.
which was its purported purpose. Um, so, as I say, nobody has to agree with me, but I can't imagine a scenario in which God would preserve his Torah and his Tanakh for this long and have it be uh, somehow be inconsistent with what he wanted us to learn from it, if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah. Do you think that within the work that we've inherited, the mixed bag, if you will, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do you feel like there's enough there for those who really, really seek to find their way back?
I think if it's if it's taught, if
Yeah.
it's taught in the context that I sort of tried to just lay out, they'll
Yeah.
find their way back.
Yeah.
There's no question. But in the meantime, if you take it at face value, you obviously, based on our centuries of history, aren't going to pick up on what's going on without doing some serious work.
Yeah.
But I think the message that it is, these man-made religions, of which the temple cult is the prime example, are useless to God, useless to you as a child of God in getting close to Him. I think that's the message of the Levitical Torah.
Yeah. You certainly have. I've often thought about this idea of a mixture of wheat and tares, and I know I'm taking a little bit of liberty with a parable that's stuck in my mind from decades past. But I do tend to think that what we have inherited is the good, the bad, and the ugly in a way. And I tell you, like you, I've spent my life studying these words and hope to live many, many more years and doing much more of this. What I'm trying to do, having a few years under my belt of identifying, let's say, the problems or the discrepancies or the different voices, this is kind of what I want to do. It's almost like and I don't have any musical talent, but when I imagine a composer, someone who has all these different musicians sitting
Yeah,
before, and
yeah,
each one has a different part to play, I almost want to do like this. Like, I want to hear the brass, I want to hear the strings, I want to hear and I am listening now at all of these different voices, and what I'm really looking for, I want to do this. Like, I want it to be quiet so that I can hear one voice. I want to hear Moses. And when I hear the real Moses, now let's bring in these other instruments and it's going to be obvious. Well, that may not be the best example, but in my mind, I think about that. What I was told was that this is all harmonistic and there's no discrepancy. And, there were these sacrifices and they all pointed to this and so forth. And I think the more that we dig into this, now one of the things that we have to do is identify how it all came together. You actually sent me a note the other day, not too long ago. It's one thing to identify all these different voices, but when do we come together with how did we get to where we are? And I think that's where a lot of people find themselves now. We see the documentary hypothesis, one theory as to how that all came together. And I'm not sure I buy all of that. But it's at least a part of someone else's solution, if that makes sense.
Well, it's at least an answer to why you have doublets and triplets all over the place.
Yeah,
that's the principal source of it being developed in the first place.
That's right. That's right. And so I'm interested in, I think what you're interested in and what many others on this group are interested in. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but I tell you, you use the word disconcerting. When I first started getting into this, I was a little bit rocked back on my heels. And I think it went away fairly quickly for me, thankfully, because I first saw that I started noticing these difficulties, and but then I immediately said, well, what is the choice here? The only option is to push forward and to discern what is true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
good stuff.
If you look at it from 30,000 feet, and your assumption is that, the Levitical Torah was God's word and his prescription for how we're supposed to live.
Yeah.
And then you see 722 BC
mm-hmm.
and the Assyrians, and you see 586 BC and the Babylonians.
Yep.
And you see 70 AD and the Romans, and you say 135 AD
mm-hmm.
and the Romans. You got to put two and two together.
Yeah.
That stuff was not what he wanted.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it starts to be pretty obvious, doesn't it?
You got some empirical evidence there to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mentioned this a few minutes ago. What really strikes me is this prophetic voice, whether it's Micah chapter 3, verse 12, whether it's Jeremiah, whether it's Jesus of Nazareth. And look, I'm aware of what many people do with the Christian text. They'll say, well, any reference to the destruction of the temple is post 70 and so forth. I'm aware of that. I don't believe it necessarily, but I'm aware of that thinking. But what I wonder is if we have not had successive generations of a voice inspired by God to say, this is not what I wanted.
Yeah.
This, if you insist on continuing with this, I will destroy it before your face again.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel that is one of the underlying messages that's echoed through the ages. I when I did the study on Jeremiah, I was so moved. Yeah, I knew Micah. I knew the story about Micah, the Morashite, and how he had said that this place is going to be a plowed field. But the fact that people were talking about that event in Jeremiah, quite a ways, many years later, and they said, hey, remember Micah said something like Jeremiah's saying too.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes me think we are slow learners. And we love pageantry, and we love, let's, we're going to,
stuff.
What's that?
Man-made stuff.
Yeah. Yep. It's going to work, and we're going to make it work, and this is the way. We have chosen our own ways, to use Isaiah's words. And, I'll be damned if I'm going to change it any other way. I'm going to keep going with what I want to do. But God ultimately says, these are things you desired. And I think it becomes obvious. I think every time someone decides to rebuild a temple or sacrifice a red heifer or any of that stuff, it never comes to fruition. Doesn't last.
Yep.
Good
Anyway,
stuff.
that's my thought for the day.
Hey, good. One more point, Doug, and I don't know if it's even possible, but at the conference, one of the things that I want to do, our United Israel Conference is coming up in April 25 through 27, here in Jackson in Louisiana. And one of the things that I wanted to do, we've got a few lectures, obviously, but I want to have a conversation from people. I want people to have this really good discussion about life now, seeking to understand my new life, understanding the Bible, given that we have some of these new awarenesses, the documentary hypothesis and academic critical approach to the Bible. I want to hear what people think about. And so anyway, I'm saying to everybody who's here, if you can come to the conference at the end of April, we're limited on space. We've got about 40 people who've signed up now. I think we can go to about 60. So I'll be sending notes out pretty soon to let people know, yep, you're good, you're in the count. If you've already registered, you're in the count, so don't worry about that. But anyway, I think it's going to be fun, and I look forward to that.
Is it possible for Seth to Zoom it?
Oh, definitely. We're going to do everything we can to have the whole sessions streamed, for that weekend. So that's our goal. Obviously, there'll be some elements which aren't conducive to streaming, people mingling around and eating, carrots and, snacks. And that's not necessarily what we'll do. But the rest of it, we'll try to have all that come out. So, yep. Good stuff. Hey, I thank you, Doug.
Yep.
All
right, Todd and Angel.
Hey, I just wanted to say something in response to James earlier. Actually, I have a question. Isn't the Hebrew word for Messiah, Moshiach, isn't it related to Moses' name in Hebrew, Moshe? Aren't they the same root word?
It's different in this sense. Now, that's good that you recognize root letters, radical letters. Like you've got the M, you've got the Mem, you've got the Sheen. And so those two letters are the same as what you would see in Messiah. But in Hebrew, Mashach is Mem, Sheen, Het. And then the word for Moshe is Mem, Sheen, Hey. Now, let me just make this point, because this is, first of all, again, it's excellent that you're noticing these two letters that are identical, but it's so different, the two words, that it's like saying the word car and cat. You see, you go, well, what's the difference in a car and a cat? Well, they have the first two same letters, but that third letter makes a world of a lot of difference, you see. And but I'm glad you brought that up, because it helps me explain that one piece. Just because you have the first couple of letters doesn't necessarily connect the two. But Moshe is interpreted according to the Hebrew Bible as meaning to draw out. I think it actually ties more closely to the Egyptian word Moses, which means son of, than it does to the Hebrew. But I think it's a play. I could almost imagine this brilliant daughter of Pharaoh said, I've got the perfect name for this kid. I pulled him out of the water, and the Hebrew word Moshe means to pull, out of the water. And in Hebrew, it means one thing, but in Egyptian, it means the son of, and we don't know And I can imagine all those girls sitting around her going, that is so special. You're so bright. You're so brilliant. It's just the way I think the story went down. All right. Good point, though.
Also, Marianne made a point in the comments that Cyrus was considered a Mashiach.
That's right.
But he was not anointed with oil.
That's right. Yeah, and that's a good point. A lot of times when I see some of my Jewish friends, and particularly those who like to scoff and make fun of Christianity, they've got this real narrow view of the Messiah. You go, well, according to Jewish tradition, this is what the Messiah is, and they'll go into the great detail that the Messiah is going to rebuild the temple. He's going to do this. He's a Jewish descendant of David, and they have this tight list. And the only named Messiah, at least in Deutero-Isaiah, that's named, is this figure Cyrus, who is a Persian. He's not even Jewish at all. And God calls him my Messiah. So, we don't have, it's interesting, even though people have developed this idea of what is the Messiah and what are the messianic expectations from the Hebrew Bible, even though we have a lot of ideas about that, the Hebrew Bible doesn't have much to say about a coming Messiah. And I'm glad this came up earlier when James brought up the question, what do we do with something like Samuel? Is he a Messiah? And a better way to think about it, again, is there's a difference between an anointer and the anointed. James is, I see Tabor's on, and we've had a lot of years of discussions back and forth on this very subject. It's very important, particularly when we're looking at eschatological figures. What are we really waiting on here? So, good stuff. All right, what else, Angel?
That's all I got.
Okay, all right. Okay, anything else from the audience that you want to discuss today? What are some of the thoughts? I don't see any hands raised at the present. This whole study of this period that we're in now from Exodus chapter 25 on is particularly the rest of Exodus 25 through Exodus 40, the time of the tabernacle, the building of the construction of the tabernacle and so forth is central to this priestly material. You can't not see it anywhere you look, whether you're in Exodus from 25 on, you get to Leviticus, you get to the book of Numbers. That's why it's so interesting to look at how different the writer of Deuteronomy presents the material. What's in, what's out, what's missing, what's present. And I think that's one of the things that's going to really stand out for us as we work through this material. All right. And Clody, welcome. Shabbat Shalom.
Again.
How are you?
I'm good. So I just wanted to ask, because my memory in English is not the best.
Okay.
I know that God said that, at least in some of the verses, that you didn't see any form or anything up in the
Yeah,
mountain, right?
that's right.
If that's the reality, if that is the truth, then how come Moses saw all this Mishkan model?
Mm-hmm. Whew, that's some good questions there. Yeah. So we have two different views. We have the priestly view, which is all of the stuff that we're talking about when we talk about the Mishkan and the Mikdash and the Tavnit. Remember, a lot of this stuff is only in the priestly material we find in Exodus, particularly 25 through 40. You get to Deuteronomy, Deuteronomy doesn't know anything about any of this. It just does not mention it. And so it's clearly we have different sources. I think that is the main point of this, is that Deuteronomy is very, very specific and very convinced that you didn't see anything. Now, having said that, we do have this view that's presented by the writer of this priestly material. They want us to understand that this was seen by Moses and only by Moses. But at best, they're reporting it secondhand, you see, because they're not with Moses. The material is third person. Moses went up the mountain, and after a week, he was invited into the cloud, and he was shown all these things. Well, who's telling the story? Now, the traditional view is that Moses is telling the story, but it's not written in the first person. So we think that it is certainly a later priestly writer who's trying to give us this information.
I mean, we have a first commandment that says, I am Elohim, your Elohim, who liberated you from the land of Egypt, from a house of servitude. There shall not be to you other Elohim. This was a very beautiful ending, by the way, of the class today. You shall not make for yourselves a carved thing or any formed thing that is in the heavens above, or that is on the earth below, or that is in the waters under the earth.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
shall not bow down to them. You shall not serve them. I am Elohim, your Elohim.
Yeah.
And what happens with Mishgan? Is that the word for the mercy seat?
The mercy seat is the ketoret, the covering, the lid.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
What happens with that?
Yeah, you got to
we
put
have
some angels
two
on the
little-
top of it.
Yeah, we have two little angels, and of course they keep that ark all over when they are in war, or when they go out of the wilderness.
Yeah.
So it is some kind of worshipping object.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this is really, it's easier than we think it is.
You mean to discern between true and false. You find it to be easier. Yeah, it's almost like we have certain built-in litmus tests that we go, oh, well, wait a minute. It says not to make anything associated with anything in the heaven above or the earth. Oh, and now they put them on the box that supposedly contains the very 10 words.
And those cherubs, with what I have seen in different documentaries, you can see them all over the place in Babylon.
Yeah.
So how come we got this in the mercy seat where the God of Israel sets his feet, at least? So I think it's very easy.
And it's also, do you find it also on that same point? I'm beginning to, and this is a practice that a lot of scholars have followed. When you notice that we see similarities in other cultures surrounding them, it becomes more likely that these are the time frames where some of these things crept into the text. You know, like Jonah and I brought up some similarities between some ancient Egyptian associations that they're very closely resembling what we see in some of the stuff about the tabernacle. So there could be some of this material that's mentioned in Egyptian sources, and so you can see an obvious connection. But just as your point, we see some Persian influence, we see some Babylonian influence. So there,
I mean, it's not a clean Israeli way. If we see it in other nations that do not claim to worship the God of Israel, then the common sense tells me that it's not clean.
Yeah.
It's easier.
Yeah.
And also I wanted, we see it all over Tanakh and the New Testament, that God does not need a temple.
Uh-huh.
and that there will come a time where we won't have a temple, we won't need a temple, because we ourselves are going to be God's temple, or whatever phrases you find.
Yep.
So that makes me think, like, do we need this temple? And if we come in 2025 as we are today, and we see how these temples, and I'm not talking here only for Israel's temple, I'm talking here even for Saint Sophia and many other temples around the world. Those are really war means.
Say that again. They're what? War?
War means, a means for a war.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
So yeah, perhaps they have power. They have, I mean, the temples and these sacred places. They hold power. They hold money. And that is how all the nations are fighting to get that piece of land. While if we were to believe that God does not have a house, we would have been really peaceful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's all the beginning of 2025 has got me with this war themes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. I tell you that it is certainly, particularly the Temple Mount, is one of the most contested pieces of property. I mean, we know, we've seen over the course of history a lot of bloodshed in that region, and
it
you
is
know,
the cup of
Yep.
I don't know how it is in English. The cup of drunk.
Cup of
I
wrath.
don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
Drunkenness. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what I
Mm-hmm.
want.
Reeling drunkards.
Yeah.
Mm.
And also, just to add something, I really loved the discussion then that you and Dr. Tabor were suggesting from Aaron and the other two young men. I don't remember now, for the sacrifices, Christocracy and
Oh yeah.
and the Moses scroll.
Aaron Abke and Cam Waters. Yeah.
That was a really good discussion, and I don't think that I'm very much concerned with my diet.
Yeah.
As far as I do try to keep biblical kosher.
Yeah.
However, it makes you think when Yeshua gave to his disciples a cup of wine and a piece of bread, but no lamb.
Yeah.
That makes you think. It is a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like the whole fight between Yeshua and the Pharisees has to do with the sacrificial system.
Yeah.
It was very good. I really suggest it to everybody that hasn't seen it yet.
Well, and you know, that's one of the things I'm going to stay on stage, Clody. I'm not going to let you go yet, but I'm going to tell our YouTube audience, Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope to see you next week, and we're going to continue with our conversation for the Yachad. So if you're a member of the Yachad, you need to come to the Zoom call now. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Shabbat Shalom.